here I have used Python programming language. Why I have used Python in the sense the Python has a vast amount of libraries to deal with the data. So it is very data friendly, this R, Python and all. So yes, that is why I have used this. If you have any other programming languages, like if you are more interested with MATLAB, you can go ahead with that. Even Wolfram Mathematica also, you can do this kind of coding. And even Julia is also very easy and data friendly to implement this machine learning and deep learning. So for this hands-on session, I have used these two papers. One is Taming Instabilities in Power Grid Network by Decentralized Control. And the other paper is this one, Towards Consigned Model of Grid Stability. These two are very useful papers for doing any kind of hands-on session because they have provided their simulation data set, whatever data they had conducted the experiment with. And I have used the same data to implement my classification on that. How it is done, we'll be seeing now. So this paper, it mainly deals with the decentral smart grid control, which was recently proposed as a robust and decentralized approach to balance supply and demand and to guarantee a grid operation that is both economical and dynamically feasible. In this work, they have analyzed the impact of network topology by assessing the stability of essential network motif using both linear stability analysis and Bayesian volume for delay system. And coming to this paper, they have bind the electricity price to the grid frequency. So the participants in the grid is assumed to have an identical behavior in this experiment. So this paper discusses how data mining technique help to remove certain simplifications while keeping the representation of the insights very concise. So in these papers, a methodology is strictly tied to monitoring one particular property of the grid, that is frequency. So measuring the grid frequency at the premise of each customer would suffice the network administrator with all the required information about the current network power balance so that it can price its energy offering and inform customers accordingly. And this DSGC, differential equation based mathematical model described in the work, aims at identifying grid instability. For a reference, 4-star node architecture, which comprises of one power source that is also called as a centralized generation node, supplying energy to the other three consumption nodes. So the model takes into consideration input features which is related to the total power balance, nominal power produced or consumed at each grid node, the time response of participants to adjust consumption and or production in the response to the price changes, which is also referred to as reaction time, and the energy price elasticity. So these are all the consumption nodes. This is the generation node or the energy source. So this is the 4-star node network what they have considered in the experiment. So here the data set chosen for this machine learning exercise has a synthetic nature and contains results from simulation of grid stability. For a reference, 4-node star network. Synthetic in nature in the sense they have entire control over that simulation. How much nodes should be there, what are its associated property, and there are no problems such as there will be some missing data and all. In real time, you will feel a lot of inconsistent data, whereas you are running the simulation, the experiment is under your control. That is why it is mentioned that it is a synthetic nature. And this data set in this hands-on session has 60,000 observations. 60,000 observation in the sense 60,000 rows are there. And it also contains 12 primary predictive features and 2 dependent variables. What are all the predictive features it has seen is tau1 to tau4, the reaction time of each network participant, a real value within the range 0.5 to 10. Tau1 corresponds to the supplier node, tau2 to tau4 to the consumer nodes. P1 to P4 has nominal power produced, which is positive, or consumed, negative, by each network participant. A real value within the range -2 to -0.5 for consumers, which has attributes from P2 to P4. So as the total power consumed equals the total power generated, which is P1, that is supplier node. That will be negative of summation of P2, P3 and P4. And G1 to G4 is the price elasticity coefficient for each network participant, a real value within the range 0.05 to 1. G1 corresponds to the supplier node, G2 to G4 to the consumer node, and G stands for gamma. What are all the dependent variables? So one is stability. Stab it is given by the maximum real part of the characteristic differential equation root if positive. The system is linearly unstable if negative, linearly stable. StabF is a categorical label used. It is either related to stable or unstable. Here I have taken them binary. Binary categorical data in the sense it is either 0 or 1. So as there is a direct relationship between stab and stabf, stabf is stable if stability is less than or equal to 0 and unstable otherwise. Stab will be dropped and stabf will remain as the sole dependent variable. As the dataset content comes from the simulation exercise, there are no missing values. So this made life more simple this time. Also, all features are originally numerical. No feature coding is also required. Such dataset properties allow for a direct jump to machine modeling without the need of data pre-processing or feature engineering. So if you want to know more about what this experiment is, I would recommend all of you to go to this Kaggle exercise. They have given more details as what it is exactly about. And even the paper is quite interesting. If you have time, please go through that. It is really interesting paper, and you can add your own problem statement and you can work on those data sets. So I will be discussing it as we go towards the hands-on session. So this hands-on sessions is inspired from the work in Kaggle, which gives the predicting smart grid stability with deep learning. And this data set has been hosted by UCI Machine Learning Repository. You can download the data set directly from this link. Or if you are more interested, I would love to share this notebook and data set for all of you during exercise. So first we have to import the required libraries, whatever is required for Python. So I will be dealing with pandas and will be dealing with NumPy, and to see some histogram plotting of the data, whatever the data set I have uploaded, and be using this matplot library, and I'm going to import the OS. This is because my entire data set is a zip format, so I have to put it into readable format for that. That's why I have to extract all the data from the zipped file format. That is why I'm going to use this OS. So first, I'll be providing you the data set and even the notebook also. This is a Google Colab notebook. If you want to run this program or you want to put your own coding for that, apart from whatever I have given, just go to File and save a copy in Drive. You go with that. And in your particular Google Drive, you would have a copy of this program. So start doing changes in that localized copy of the program, so that if something goes wrong, you can revert back to this original program and see where the problems have been happening around. So after I have downloaded the data set and I have saved it on my local system, so I will be uploading the data set. Since I'm using Google Colab, I have to use from google.colab import file, and all those files will be uploaded here. As soon as you run this button, this will be enabled. So you can upload your zip file. So whatever the uploaded data set is there, it is in a zip file format because it's around 1 GB or something. So that zip file, it needs to be extracted and it is done in the read mode. Means I I don't have any other interest with that data set. I only want to read it. I don't want to rewrite or append that existing data set and all. That is why specifically I am mentioning the operating system to open it only in the read mode. So for that, I'm going to use this particular packages for that, and I'm going to extract all the contents of the zip file. After uploading the data set and extracting those contents, I have to put it in a readable format. Means it should be either in rows and columns. Since it is a huge data set, to make it more readable, I want to put it in rows and columns. That is why I have to put it in a data frame. For that, I have to call pandas pd.read_csv. Just put that file name, whatever it is. So now I'm going to read the entries or read the first 5 row entries of the data set. So df.head is the syntax for that. By default, if you give like this, it will show the first 5 entries of the data set. Here you can see everything is looking in terms of numbers only. This is the row number. These are all the columns present. Around 14 columns are there. Here you can see everything is number except for this stab f. Unstable, stable, unstable, like that it has been provided. So in machine learning, everything has to be in terms of numbers only. The algorithm won't understand otherwise. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to map these unstable to be 0, stable to be 1. So this is how I'm going to change. So I'm going to map unstable category. This is STAPF is a categorical data. So unstable is mapped to number 0, stable is mapped to number 1. So I'm going to call the original data frame and this particular column for that. And then I'm going to replace with this mapping technique. So again, if I call that data frame, now it has changed. So whatever was unstable, unstable, unstable and all, now it has been replaced with 0 and 1. So far and so forth, things are made much easier till now. So now I have to know the column entries of the data set and I have to ensure if there are any missing values and to know the type of the data of the column attributes here. So for that, if I call the data frame.info function, I'm going to get what are all the missing entries can be seen and what is the data type of all those columns can be seen. So since it is a simulation data, there are no missing entries. Everything remains the same. Everything is floating. And the last one stabf is given to be integer. Floating point numbers in the sense they are all decimal numbers. That is why it is given as floating. And how much memory it has used is also taken here. Since I'm using Google Colab, once I connect this, we will be using Google backend engine for the RAM and processor. From Google, I'll be using for the running this program. It won't be using my local system RAM and memory for this. It will be using from the Google backend search engine. So having done so much with this data, now I have to understand what is the statistical description of the data set. Statistical description in the sense what all comes to your mind? What are all the terms normally seen with the statistics? Correct? Mean. Standard deviation, very good. Correct? Mean. What is this KUM? Kurtosis. Okay, we will not be dealing with kurtosis this time. That is a perfect answer. Heard something called as quartile deviation. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, quartile deviations we call it as. So, as of now, what all we require is mean, median, standard deviation, quartile deviation that leads to 25%, 50%. 50% is nothing but the median only, and 75%. And what is the maximum value? What is the minimal value? Very good. So we'll be doing all these kind of statistics operation with this data also, because understanding of data is more important. Once we understand data only, we can decide what is to be done with them. So I'm going to take a count in the sense how many observation is expected in each and every columns. These are all column wise calculation has happened, okay? And what is the mean of each and every column is given. What is the standard deviation of each and every column? What is the minimum value of each and every column? What is the 25th% means first quartile of this? 50% in the sense what is the median or the midpoint of this data set? What is the 75th quartile of this? And what is the maximum value in each and every column? This data can be description is given by df.discrete function. So instead of manually doing the calculation, especially for data frame, if you use .discrete function, it will give you everything automatically. But only thing what is to be remembered is each and every column should have number as the data. If you have some categorical data like grades, good, bad, average, these kind of grading system and all are there, the discrete function won't work on those particular columns. So it will automatically eliminate them and take only the columns which has only numerical data. So after understanding this, we are going for the visualization of the data set. It is better if we have a Gaussian or bell curve for data, so that you can understand what are all the where are the maximum points you can take, and the rest can be ignored to normalize the data. So for the part of pre-processing, I'll be using this histogram plotting for that. So I'm using import matplot library .pyplot as PLT. I'm going to call histogram. I have used 50 bins. Each of size of these figures is mentioned, and I'm going to call that plt.show. It will show how the data has been plotted here. So then we have to understand the correlation between the attributes. What do you get the point called as correlation? If I say something as a correlation, heard something called as positive correlation and negative correlation. Supposing, consider some kind of equation, f of x equals y. This is a function. If x is increasing, what do you expect y to happen? Very good, gives direction of variation. Okay, very good. So if x is increasing, y is also increasing. This gives positive correlation. If y is increasing, sorry, if x is increasing and y is decreasing, it gives negative correlation. Means how the value of attributes of one increasing or decreasing will give the insight about how the dependent variable is acting on that. Correct? So how positive and negative correlation is acting is to be seen. If they are zero, it means that both of the attributes are not correlated. Means whether one increases or decreases, the other won't have any impact. Yes, correct. Negative correlation means the variable move in the opposite direction. Correct. When one is increasing, the other is decreasing in the sense, yes. Value of one thing leads to decrease in the value of the other thing. That is the negative correlation. So always understand there should be no correlation between the rows. Rows should never have any correlation. There are independent observation. We are dealing only with respect to column values here. That is one point to be remembered. So for the same reason, I have taken the correlation. I have taken tau1. With respect to tau1, how the other attributes are acting, I am seeing the correlation between the attributes. So after plotting the correlation matrix, now I have to split my data set. So given there is 14 columns I have in the data set, so all the rows I have considered until the 12th column, from 0th means from the very first column till the 12th column will be my X attribute, and depending on that X, what will be my Y attribute is taken. So I'm going to learn everything about X. I'm training my system everything with respect to X, how the Y should be according to that. Means from this is the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm going this till this, it will be my X, and only this thing will be my Y. I'll be training my model such a way that given all these values of X, what should be my Y? It will be trained. My model is going to train on that. So the last column will be Y, all the remaining first to 12 will be X. So the training means the entire data set I have given of 60,000 observation. 60,000 observation is there. A part of it will be part of training data. And I'm going to split little portion on the testing data. I'm going to train my model so much on the training, and then I'm going to test that model on the testing data set, how it is working. Ideally, whatever is the data set, 80% should be in the training, 20% should be part of testing. And we have to control the learning rate also for this. If it is too high, it is expected to make a lot of mistake. If it is too low, it is expected to be very inaccurate in predictions. And there are other problems such as overfitting, underfitting and all. Means if you overdo that training, it won't learn anything on its own. Everything will be like it already been trained or spoon fed and all. The intention of the model that it should learn from the data. That is why you shouldn't overfit or underfit the data. So these are all some of the points to be remembered. So from 0 to 54,000 will be my training value, and all the points will be as my, for the training values will be taken here. And for the training also I have taken from 0 to 54,000 will be my training set. And after 54,000 to whatever 60,000 is remaining will be my testing data. So we are going to normalize it. Because it is also important to remove the noise and all, that is why we have to normalize them. And then we are doing some kind of feature scaling of the values to make them fit into the model. For that, I'm going to import standard scalar using scikit-learn, and I'm going to transform my training and testing data set by X attributes for the same. And I'm using logistic regression for that. Means some of the regression models can also be used for classification data. This y equals mx plus c, everyone knows this equation. This is to fit a line. Best fit is used for regression. Why I am using logistic regression in the sense, logistic regression equation is given by e power x whole upon 1 minus e raised to x. So the value lies between 0 to 1. So whatever it is contained neatly within this. So this makes classification more easier. That is why I am going to use logistic regression for the same. So I am going to use it for predicting. After predicting, I have to see what are all the confusion matrix accuracy, how much it is, I have to see. Why I am using confusion matrix accuracy in the sense there are some problems with respect to this. What are the performance measure for classification? One thing what we see is precision and recall. So precision, it only comments on the correct positive prediction out of all positive prediction, whereas recall provides an indication of missed positive predictions also. So recall is typically used to measure the coverage of the minority class. Precision is appropriate when minimizing the false positive is the focus. Recall is appropriate when minimizing false negatives is the focus. Precision quantifies the number of positive class prediction that actually belong to the positive class. Recall quantifies the number of positive class prediction made out of all positive examples in the data set. So in order to have a single score for both this precision and recall, I use another score called F1 score. It usually provides a single score that balances both the concerns of precision and recall in one particular number. And this is the confusion matrix. This is the predicted class. This is the actual class. We see something called as true positive, false negative, false positive, true negative. So what is true positive in the sense? There are a number of instances of positive classes which are correctly predicted. False negative in the sense, number of instances of positive class which are incorrectly predicted as negative class. You will see in medical reports. Usually they use lot of terms called as true positives and false negative. The meaning of them is this: number of instances of positive class incorrectly predicted as negative class. Means different diseases may have the same symptom. So there are chances to mistake that particular symptom corresponds to that particular disease only. So that is why we call something called as false negative and all. So that's why they get into more detailed diagnosis for the same. What is false positive in the sense? Number of instances of negative class incorrectly predicted as positive class, and true negative in the sense, number of instances of negative class correctly predicted. So this is the insight about the confusion matrix. I'm going to use it here. So having given all the true positive and false negative, all those values, the accuracy of this binary classification is expected to be around 81%. So now if I want to build one deep learning model for the same by using the GRU layers and all, how a deep neural network looks like in the sense, I'm just going to give a pictorial representation. See, this is my input. I am having one or two hidden layers. Here only all your decision making process and learning of the model take place. So depending on all this decision, it is going to give one particular output. This is one simple machine learning model. Here hidden layers are not connected. These hidden layers are connected to different hidden layers like this. So all these things gives to one particular output. This is one simple machine learning model. What happens to deep neural network in the sense, we have here I see only two hidden layers. So the more and more hidden layers you have, this leads to deep neural network. Lot and stacks of hidden layers will be there. So here only all the weights and biases will be done and all learning happens in these hidden layers. So the data from the input, it is sent to each and every node at each and every epoch. Means in human brain you might have seen all the neurons are connected to one another to make any kind of decision. If I want to replicate my human brain functionality onto a machine, I have to use activation functions. Means at first pass, I'm using this particular cell and this particular cell like that. So each and every cell has to be involved at different passes. So that's why here activation functions come into picture. I might use a TANH activation or RELA activation or a sigmoid activation so that each and every neuron has been involved in the part of learning. So this is some insight about the deep neural network. So I'm using what is the kernel initializer. All are given uniform weights and bias for that. Activation is ReLU activation. The input dimension I have used 12. Since I have and dimension is involved, and what is the activation functions I'm using among them, and after doing all that, you can see here automatically the accuracy of this particular deep neural network has improved up to 94%. Initially, for a simple binary classifier, it was around 81.1. So after implementing deep neural network, it tremendously increased to 94%. So here the objective I can mention is, instead of going with binary classifier, implementing deep neural network will give a better accuracy of this. So to make things more interesting, you can add your own activation functions here. You can manipulate the other input dimensions, what you can have, how many epochs, what should be the batch size and all. Giving that, you can see the results, how it is working. Or for experiment purpose, I used a small data set of 60,000 observation. IIT Bombay website, they have released more big data sets. Means they have made a data set separately for their hostel, how much they are consuming, for library, how much they are consuming and all. So you can use that data set also. It is an open source. You can use those data set, and you can also make some, you can implement ARIMA model and all, like LSTM, long short-term memories and all is there, no? So in order to implement recurrent neural network, so what will be the future consumption? You can implement recurrent neural network on such data set, and you can provide your own insights for the same. So, and it is an open source data set only, so anybody can directly download. Since it is a big data set, you can use a tensor processing unit to work on such huge data sets and all. So these are all some of the insights we can see with respect to how smart grids can be realized through machine learning and deep learning. We are already out of time, so you have any questions, we can take it up. I'll share the notebook and data sets to everyone, including